All right, crew. Sorry for the delay in getting you this demo. This demo is going to serve as the starting point for project number 3, in which you are taking photographic sketches. Now, photographic sketches, I know for a fact that that's going to confuse some folks, but be it made clear, art and design is not a commodified form of exploration. And unfortunately, there's a history associated with artists and designers thinking that their sketches have to be impeccable. But that's not the case. Leonardo da Vinci's sketches that you've seen in the museums and in the books and this, that, and the third, those are examples of successful sketches. I guarantee you that all of these masters that you've seen sketches of, which has given you the idea that somehow you have to seek perfection in everything at all times, otherwise you're a failure, those masters have way more unsuccessful sketches that exist. And to this end, I want to point out the purpose of a sketch is to solve problems. It is not to prove skill. So the final project that you produce, or final work of art or final work of design, that is the result of sketching, that's where you actually should be pursuing the excellence. So when I say sketches, photographic sketches, I don't mean that I want you to take 10 photographs and then draw versions of those 10 photographs. No, the photographs are the sketches. It is where you are solving visual problems. It is where you are trying to suss out the compositional success when arranging certain objects together. Now, to that end, for this assignment, for part 1, the sketching phase, all we need is you to create a 7-inch by 9-inch frame. You can trace this out on a piece of paper like I'm about to show you. And then an arrangement of objects that fit within that frame and take up space in interesting ways. I want you to include at least one fabric, preferably a fabric that is somewhat patterned or interesting, but that's not necessarily a requirement. It could just be an interesting texture. And then from there, I want you to put together interesting arrangements of other objects. So they can be natural, they can be, by that I mean organic, like plant or tree or leaves or rocks, or they can be inorganic. But I want you to remind yourself the entire time while you're selecting these objects that you're going to use that you will be rendering these in micron pen. Now, to that extent, when you are transferring the information of one media to the next, in this case we are going to be transferring physical textural collages and rendering them in micron pen. That's a medium translation. Other medium translations exist when someone is looking at a person and then rendering them in paint. That person exists over there. They are their own material composition. They are physical bone, flesh, and body. The painting is an image of that person, and thus you're creating a material translation. Anytime something goes through a translation, information is lost. Specifically here, we're going to have a physical textural collage, and then you're going to be translating that into a micron pen drawing. The physical textural collage, that's in 3 dimensions. Your micron pen drawing is going to be in 2 dimensions. So an entire dimension of information is getting lost in this translation. It's a lot of information. The objective is going to be the objective is how are you able to retain as much information as you can. Another area that you will be losing in translation is color. You're going to be translating colored based physical objects into black and white micron pen using only line, texture, and value to create volume, the three-dimensionality, form, where one texture and value meet another texture and value. There is a difference in form or shape, so you can see it here. The texture of my beard is different than the texture of my cheek. There's not a clean-cut line defining the difference. Where one texture meets another texture, shapes are different. Same is happening with my shirt to my neck. This white patch on my ceiling to this brown patch on my ceiling. There's no dark outline cartooning its way through life. Transitions exist where one texture and value or color meets another. So how can you retain as much information as you can in this translation? That's what we're after here. And this is going to require you to select objects that you think that you actually can translate in terms of the value and texture and overall form. To that end, I'm not necessarily interested in you oversimplifying things, but definitely like pick a few things that might be challenging, because that's the whole purpose of school, is to try and figure out what your skill set is and how to push those skills so that you can be the best that you can. But definitely don't pick like, I don't know, a size 5 soccer ball, because that size 5 soccer ball is not going to fit into your frame, the 7 inches by 9 inch frame, right? So we got to pick and choose objects that fit within this project. So to that extent, I'm going to show you some objects that I've selected. I'm going to run you through some compositional arrangements in terms of shape, size, line, texture, overlapping, and replacing objects when things don't work well. And every time I think a composition works well, one, I'll tell you in the video, and two, I'm going to put a tally mark on the piece of paper beside it. That tally mark, I want you to think about as the equivalent of me taking a photograph, and that photograph will serve as my sketch. Now, the way the sketch works, after I've taken 10 sketches, I'm going to look through all the photographs. I'm going to figure out which ones are the most strong. And because I have the photographs, and then I also have the objects still, I can recreate that compositional set using the objects by referencing my photograph. And then I can recreate it. If I need to, I can glue it in place, and then I can start in on stage 2, which is going to be the textural observations and actually learning how to draw this one-to-one reference using micron pen. So I'm going to flip the camera and show you some objects. All right, so to start off, here's my 7 inch by 9 inch frame. I've just traced it onto a piece of paper. All right, so 7 inches here and 9 inches there. My tally marks will be probably up here just so you can see them. I'm going to rotate some objects here. Here's my fabric. It's a cut swatch of a shirt that got heavily stained. And it's got, you know, a basic pattern, and where the folds and overlaps occur, the contrast is not that high. The brights are not super bright, the darks are not super dark. So when I'm rendering this in micron pen, it'll be pretty straightforward. Here's a piece of cardboard. I'm not using the whole cardboard. I separated it. I'm only going to use the corrugated part because I feel like that's a pretty interesting texture. Definitely, I mean, in my opinion, it's wicked interesting. So here's an old wrench. There's some nice highlights that come through. It's overwhelmingly dark, but I think it has a really nice shape, but there's some nice values that are created here with the shifts. So, you know, game on there. I ripped a piece of a fig branch, so fig branch is going to be part of my game. This is the perforated edge of the piece of paper that I just pulled out of my sketchbook. I don't know why, but I find it interesting. It also casts some pretty nice shadows on the paper. And there's this flexibility of being able to manipulate, which I think is pretty interesting. And then my kid is really into dinosaurs. And so anytime I'm hiking and I find bones on the trail or off the trail, I collect them for him. And then of course I like cure them so they're not like full of nasties. But I'm gonna use some bones here because I find them interesting and yeah, they're easily accessible. So starting in on the compositional sets, I find it really helpful to start with the larger, flatter objects in the background. And when I'm, placing objects, I'm looking at how this form interacts over space, right? And we're going to be drawing only the 7" by 9" frame. So if some of it extends off the frame, not a problem. It is the sketch that we're most interested in here, which is the composition within the frame. So basically this is straightforward. I'm looking at the shapes, and then based on how I've placed a shape, it kind of determines where my next shapes have the possibility of going. Do I tuck this under? Do I overlap it on top? And all the while I'm thinking about where objects exit the format, what shape is created here. Is there a nice shadow, for example, that's tucked up underneath? Thinking about how all of these objects engage with each other. And how the textures contribute positively or negatively. Do I try and animate this jaw? Do I spread it out? Do I want to display it down the length of the wrench? And again, it's just problem solving. So at no point am I pressuring myself to quote unquote get it right. I am trying to figure out what is interesting and what is not. And based on the interest, I kind of follow it. Kind of like that. All right, so this I would claim as image number 1. What you would do here is arrange and then take an actual photograph. Here I'm making a video, so I'm taking a tally mark, so when I look back at my video, every time I'm looking at the stream of the video and a tick mark shows up, that means that I know that was a good composition in my opinion. And now I'm going to rearrange these objects again to create the next composition. You can modify your objects as you need to, but remember if there was a composition from before that you liked, say image number 1 was really nice, and you've modified your objects, then that means they have changed, and you might have to find those objects again or their equivalent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a fabric. That's interesting too. And again, this is all just visual problem solving. So I'm trying to figure out how these objects, when placed together, how they interact, and what creates interest, just pure visual interest. I think something needs to be up here, but I don't want to use the objects I have, so I'm going to look for something else. This is just a piece of foam brush. I think that's nice. So, record. 3. All right, so let's keep on going. I'm gonna try and work faster now. I think you guys get an idea of what we're after here. I had some screws handy, so I'm going to bring in some screws just because they're here. Again, working with what you have and being willing to modify it as you go. Okay. changed everything. The struggle of trying to do this while on a tripod. For the sake of flatness, I'm bringing this in. This is not part of my composition. Okay, I think that works. So this will be another one. All right, so I think you get the idea. You arrange the compositions, you try and figure out what's working, what's not, and you just keep rearranging objects, sometimes swapping one object out for another, sometimes swapping one object out for several others. And you're essentially trying to work through the balance that is occurring within the composition in terms of the shapes, the textures, the directions. When I was working with the screws, those screws are pointing in a myriad of directions, which creates visual paths for the viewer. You're also working now with volume, so the three-dimensionality of objects, which volume you experimented with in the last project. Volume is created, or the illusion of volume is created through the use of texture, and then also the use of value. Value creates this illusion of form that exists in space. So now you can utilize that element and principle combination to create the illusion of a three-dimensional wrench, for example, right? The shadow versus the highlight, the overall form, the textural difference, for example, between this wrench and my thumb. They're similar in shape, but the texture is remarkably different and the value is remarkably different. And as a result, if you were rendering a composition of a hand and a wrench, you're not going to have a hard contour line or cartoon line. You're going to render it using specifically value and texture. So arrange your compositions, take photographs of the strong ones. If it takes a while to figure out what's good and what's bad, no worries. Just push through. It's really not that huge of a challenge to do before spring break. So just work through it. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, obviously email me. Again, I am available. I know that this is an asynchronous course and you guys are working literally all over the world. And some of you are working night shifts, some of you are working day shifts. But if there's a question that you have that we need to talk about, we can still schedule, no matter what the time is, to meet in Zoom or have a phone call. Or if it's something that we can run through an email, that's good too. But definitely, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, reach out. That's what I'm here for. Can't wait to see y'all's work.